So like as she said, there are 10 medical schools, and in those we work with 9 graduate entry programs. So if you're completing your bachelor's or your master's, 6 undergrad entry options, and then within those 6, there are 2 programs that will allow you to start if you have some college, some university, or even if you have all of your university, you've completed a bachelor's and you're just not ready to sit the MCAT. If you want to look at those 2 programs, those are options as well. All right, so graduate entry medicine, we're going to go over grad entry and then undergrad entry. So to give you an idea of what's required, it actually comes as a little bit of a surprise to a lot of students that I speak with and parents, that the Australian schools are assessing in over 3 different, they're looking at 3 different components. So they're looking at your MCAT, your performance in an interview, and your GPA. References, supplemental forms, there's no essay writing, those sorts of things are not included. So it tends to be pretty straightforward in terms of application documents, and we can give really solid advice on what's competitive because the assessment criteria is it allows us to run reports on MCAT scores, and we have seen thousands of transcripts, so we're pretty good at figuring out students' GPAs and advising on that. So let's talk about GPA first. For the majority of the undergrad med programs, you want to have at least a 70. Some of them are a little bit more competitive, so into the 80s is what you'll need. But in general, if you're between a 70 or 80, you should give it a go and talk to us. And then MCAT wise, a 507 or above is what we are advising is competitive for this year's applicants. That said, you don't necessarily need that. We definitely have students who have well below those scores that are successful each year. It all comes down to also what your GPA is like, how you do in the interview, and then how the university actually performs their assessments, which we'll talk about in a second. But if we look at and there's some prerequisites for 2 of the schools as well. So Monash is looking for a very heavy biomedical undergrad. So you want to have a bachelor's in physiology, biochemistry, genetics, pharmacology, a lot of subjects related to those types of fields. So that's for Monash. For the University of Queensland, they need a systems physiology as well as a cell biology course. So we're happy to talk with you about that. If you have questions or are wondering if you would be meeting those prerequisites, we can definitely look at your transcript and give you some advice. So over to the chart on the right. I feel like I need to slow it down a little bit. I'm probably talking too fast. The chart on the right lists all of the graduate entry universities that we work with. You'll see the minimum MCAT scores there. So depending on the school, they're either looking for a minimum in each section of your MCAT, or they're looking for an overall score. So Deakin University, for example, at the very top there, 125 in each section is required. And then the University of Queensland, for example, wants a 504 overall. So those are the minimums, and you do have to meet the minimums in order for you to be eligible to apply and for us to submit an application. You'll see a few asterisks there beside Melbourne and Sydney. Their minimums are actually lower than what we have posted there, the university minimums. But over the years, we've determined that because of the offers that we get and the success we see and where that minimum MCAT falls for Austrec students, we've made just a decision as an organization to only submit 505 or above. We always keep it real. If we don't think you're going to be competitive somewhere, we will definitely tell you, as well as tell you where you should be aiming to apply. But that's what those 2 little asterisks there mean. And then on the far column, you'll see what is competitive. So every year we run reports at the very end of the year, and what's competitive is always higher than what the minimum scores are. And we'll have the new data on our website soon too. So in general, a 507 puts you in a good position, an 80% GPA, and then having those prerequisites for 2 schools as well. I apologize if you can hear my dog. She's jealous that I'm talking with you this evening and not with her. So how the universities assess. So this is, it looks like a lot on here on this slide, but I'll give you two examples. So each university assesses a little bit different. Normally I like to compare Sydney and Melbourne because they are very different in the way that they assess. So the University of Sydney, for example, they are going to look at your GPA first. And as long as you meet that GPA, you're then ranked on your MCAT. So their minimum GPA is around a 70%. So most students will meet that. That said, because they rank on the MCAT, it does make it quite competitive, and they haven't had an interview as part of their assessment for a number of years, and they won't be this year either. So ranking on the MCAT, that means that we typically see 513 as the lowest score that gets in. So it can be a little bit more of a challenging school to get into currently. And then if we look at Melbourne, for example, once you interview, you're then assessed for an offer based on 25% GPA, 25% MCAT, and then 50% MMI. So let's say you have, a little bit of a lower MCAT, a really strong straight A average, and then you nail your interview. You don't have to get so much hung up on the MCAT if it's a little bit lower, if those other two parts of your application are very strong. So I'll give you one, we'll talk about one more here. So Flinders University, their assessments for offer is equally weighted across the three components. So this is a conversation that we have with a lot of students. Once we've got their transcript, we know what their MCAT score is. We help you strategize where you should be applying based on this, based on your stats, and also the admissions timelines and how the universities assess whether rounds, rolling admissions, or firm deadlines. We help you with all of that.